On today's show, Brandon and Dan of the What the Puck podcast join me as we talk about the Capitals movement this past summer. The offense needed a boost. Is Pierre-Luc Dubois and Andrew Mangiapane enough? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, Brandon and Dan of the What the Puck podcast join me as we talk about this Capitals team that struggled to score offense this past season. Alex Ovechkin got off to a slow start. Dylan Strome led the team for a good chunk of the season in goal scoring. Listen, it wasn't sustainable. So GM Brian McClellan had to go out and address that on July 1st. He did that, well, even a little bit before by signing Pierre-Luc Dubois and then Andrew Mangiapane. Were those additions enough to help bolster this team? We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll talk about the other movement, the addition of Duhaime and Radish to this team. And then a little bit later, we will talk about additions of Jakob Chychrun on the blue line. Next, my conversation with Brandon and Dan. In this edition of Locked On Capitals, we are joined by Brandon and Dan from the What the Puck podcast. Guys, it's been a while. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. It's always a good time to be here on Locked On Capitals.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great to have you guys here. So when we take a look at this last season, the Capitals made it to the playoffs, which kind of defied odds. I mean, there were some ups and downs, and it came down to the wire where they had to win, 3 games in a row there to qualify for the playoffs, and they made it. Subsequently, they got eliminated in the first round. A victory, I guess you could say, but being eliminated in the first round is not ideal. And I kind of had the hunch that GM Brian McClellan was going to be active. I had no idea he was going to be quite as active as he was. And he took care of some of the business actually before July 1st by acquiring Pierre-Luc Dubois and sending Darcy Kuemper out to the Kings. Brandon, I'll start with you here first. What were your thoughts on the Capitals acquiring Pierre-Luc Dubois for Darcy Kuemper?
Well, I think we can all agree that we knew that Darcy Kuemper was going to be out the door, and it's unfortunate. He's a really good guy, but as sports go, it just makes sense. I mean, obviously he got outplayed. He lost that #1 job. So it's sad to see him go, but at the same time, there's a lot of great opportunities moving forward, and Darcy just wasn't going to be in the cards. Now, Pierre-Luc Dubois, he's a fantastic talent. He's had his ups and downs, but I think with the right coaching, he really can be a fantastic player. And I think this is a good spot for him. He had a down year before coming to the Capitals, and let's see what he can do. I mean, when you get paired with Alex Ovechkin, it's if you're not pulling your own weight, something's wrong.
So, Dan, I'll ask you next here. When you heard that he was coming here, were there any reservations where you're like, oh, not that guy? Or did you kind of have the same thought that other people thought that maybe he was underutilized with the Kings? What was your overall thoughts about PLD coming to the Caps?
I think I was first mostly shocked that teams were allowed to make trades while other teams were still playing hockey. Like, to me, it just didn't seem fair. Like Florida, like they didn't get to play along. So no, I like Brandon said, like I wasn't shocked that Kemper got traded. I think we all saw that going in, where there was no surprise there. Bringing in Dubois, I thought it's a high risk, high reward type move because he cost a lot of money. And this team does not have much cap space. And so making a move like that, I feel like it's almost, you have to have a coach and a general manager that have big egos to an extent, which is not necessarily the bad thing. Like you want your coach and general manager to have a big ego. Like you don't want them going into the season being like, let's see what happens. Like you want them thinking they're going to win the cup. So I can understand why they made the move. I think they looked at this and they went, yeah, this could end up biting us and be a big problem, but we can fix him. We can make it work out. And we need someone who has this potential talent. And if it works, it's not a steal because you gave up something of value to get him, but it's a really good move. And you've got him locked up for years if it works out. So I wasn't like a lot of people where they were just like freaking out in terms of like, what are you doing? But I have some hesitation, but I think it's just because his track record hasn't been great. But this team does have a history of bringing guys in and getting something out of them. We saw with Brett Connolly, where he was kind of bouncing around, and then he came to DC, and he wasn't like first line talent, but he was very good for this team. Devontae Smith-Pelly, not necessarily like the biggest regular season, but stepped up in the playoffs, and so they have a history of bringing guys in and being able to get something out of them. So I was apprehensive, but I'm very curious.
Yeah, and to your point, the Capitals do have a history. I guess we could also include Sonny Milano in that mix as well, as he was initially slated for playing for the Bears, but kind of just took off there. So initial thoughts on it is that he is going to play on the top line center. I know that Strome played there. Do you think that is where he fits in, or is he going to have to earn it? I'll go to you, Brandon.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I think he's going to be the top line guy. I really do. And I mean, we've seen it with our coach. He likes to switch things up, sometimes mid game. So I think the top line spot is his spot to lose, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did bounce around a little bit throughout the season. But game one, night one, I think he's going to be there with Alex Ovechkin.
So when we take a look at the move itself, there was some question about that this guy is toxic in the locker room. I heard that he wanted out of Columbus, he wanted out of Winnipeg, and he got kind of shown the door with the Kings, not by choice, but because they wanted to move on from a long contract that I think I understand what that's all about. So they moved on from him and took on Darcy Kuemper. So do you guys, I'll ask you here, Dan, do you have any reservations about his personality? I know that Matt Roy, who played with him on the Kings, said that if he was a bad guy to play for, I wouldn't have even wanted to come to the Capitals. What are your thoughts about him personally? I've heard some questionable things about him in the locker room.
I feel like, I don't think Matt Roy would have come out and said like, this guy's awful. Like that would get real awkward real fast in training camp. But so of course he's gonna come out and say something nice. But I feel like this is a group of players that are led by veterans who have been here long enough that if you come in and try and be the big man and you're gonna come in and mix things up and cause problems, it's not gonna work. And I have to imagine that McClellan and Carberry first had a conversation about this trade before anything was going to go down. But then they probably did their own research in terms of reaching out to coaches and players and were like, hey, what about this guy? What do you know about him? What's he like not only on the ice, what's he like in the locker room? And we've seen plenty of players throughout this league that have bounced around a bit before they start to kind of latch in and they solidify a spot and a role with an organization. And maybe this is where Dubois' story really takes a turn for the better in terms of his career. And so I'm not concerned about it. I feel like they have enough guys like Ovechkin's going to pull him aside and be like, you follow me. And we've seen so many videos of them being goofy before they go out on the ice that I feel like it's kind of hard to come in there and be like the closed closed off, like dude in the corner, the sulking kid. Like, I just don't think that's going to be allowed to happen.
Yeah, I mean, so it's going to be interesting to see what kind of guy he is. That my biggest cause of concern is the contract, because say for some reason this doesn't go well, you have him on your team for quite some time. And so do you think that last season was just a blip on the radar, Brandon, or do you think he's going to be able to find his way under Spencer Carberry's systems?
I've got all the confidence in the world in Spencer Carberry. So I mean, I'm hopeful. Let's see what happens in training camp and in the first month or so with Pierre-Luc Dubois on this team. But I want to say, it wasn't a good fit for anybody when he was with the Kings. So I think he's got, I don't want to say this is like one of his last chances in the NHL or anything like that. This is absolutely a long contract, but I think without that long contract, you're also putting doubt in Pierre's mind as well. The Capitals are making an investment in him, and that's the message that they sent to him. Like, you're going to be here for a while. This is going to be your home. We're going to pay you a buttload of money. That I think that would make anybody happy. So I think, like Dan said, my buddy Dan, my what the puck Dan, is that these guys are goofballs, and before games and stuff like that. So I don't know if he's been in a situation like that before, where these guys have a lot of fun before they hit the ice. And I mean, anytime you get those hype up videos before games on social media, you're sitting there going, man, I wish I was in that hallway with that team, because it looks like they're still having a blast no matter what's going on the ice or off the ice. So I think this is a good environment for him. I think that the money is really nice. And I mean, this is his spot to lose. I think they're telling him, we got faith in you. We brought you here for this reason. Now show us what you can do.
All right, so after the break, we will talk about the addition of Andrew Mangiapane. The Capitals needed a goal-scoring boost. Will he provide that? I'll discuss straight ahead. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up big bets anytime I'm in the mood. And I know that this is kind of the dog days of the sports for professional sports. The NHL and the NFL aren't actively being played, but you still have your Washington Nationals to bet on. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer. So head over to fanduel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So the Capitals struggled in the goal scoring department last year. I think suffices to say, Alex Ovechkin went into the All-Star break only scoring 9 goals. Then all of a sudden he went to Dubai, rode around a camel, found God out there apparently, and came back a changed man and ended the season with 31 goals. So we take a look at that. Ovi took a bit of a slip to start the season, found his way in the second half of the season, and there wasn't a lot of great scoring throughout the lineup. Dylan Strome was a bright spot. So one of the other big moves that the Capitals made was signing Andrew Mangiapane from the Flames, a guy that at points has shown flashes of greatness. They traded Mangiapane. In return, the Flames got a second-round pick in 2025 from the Colorado Avalanche. The trade gives the Flames more valuable draft picks. So what were your initial thoughts, Dan, about the Capitals acquiring Andrew Mangiapane?
I like the move. I think this is a team that both wants to win now, but then also wants to be able to build for the future. And they've got some good players potentially coming up, and they've had a ton of picks. And so they can move some of those out. I think that was part of the plan, is to move some of those picks out to be able to bring in players. And so when you bring in a guy like Mangiapane, who they love bringing in guys who I'm going to have a hard time spelling their name. But when they bring these guys in that can score goals, I mean, you talked about it perfectly. They had a lot of trouble with scoring goals last season. And I think this offseason was about goal scoring and about being able to provide support for Ovechkin. And that means bringing in other players that can also put the puck in the net. Last season, I think what we saw was that if other teams could shut down Ovechkin, there wasn't a lot going on. So you go into the summer and you go, we need goal scorers. But you got to give up something to get it. And not every team's going to give you a guy who can score 30, 40, 50 goals during the season. And you don't have to give up a top level prospect or an NHL ready player to be able to do that. So you go in, you talk to Calgary, you're able to bring in a guy like Mangiapane, who I think is going to be a good fit for this team. And I think that's another low risk, high reward, because if it doesn't work out, unless I'm looking at this wrong, he's a free agent after this season. So you have the ability, you have the flexibility to go, well, it didn't work. Let's move in another direction. We'll try and bring someone else in through free agency or someone again through a trade if that one doesn't work out. So I like the move. I think it's going to work out. Obviously, as a Caps fan, I'm hoping it's going to work out really well, because if there's anything this team needs this upcoming season, it's someone not named Alex Ovechkin scoring goals.
Yeah, because I mean, I think to be realistic, I think that Alex Ovechkin, of course, is going to score a fair amount of goals, of course, but it's not fair for him to, have that pressure on him squarely. And we opened up this show talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois and now talking about Andrew Mangiapane. And one of the things that Ovechkin talked about is that he felt like he lacked chemistry at the center position. And I don't know if he was trying to make excuses for a slow start. I know equipment was also drawn into question. Do you think that at least in part the addition of like a PLD, an Andrew Mangiapane, that that's going to take some of the pressure off of Ovi to have to be the guy to score a lion's share of the goals? We'll go to here, Brandon.
Yeah, I think those guys absolutely will come in, and the hope is that they're going to take some of that pressure off of Ovi. But we also need to look at the guys that are a part of this team that are still here. We have to look at Connor McMichael. You have to look at Henrik Lapierre, who had a great postseason with the Hershey Bears. Those guys, they need to have confidence on the ice. As much as we're hopeful that these new guys coming in will help with the goal scoring, these other guys need to help with the goal scoring as well. Like we said, I mean, it was pretty abysmal last year, but there is some really good talent on this team with these young guns, these young guys. If these guys can get on the same page and we can all, work as a unit, then everybody should be scoring goals. It's not just Alex Ovechkin, even though we want him to hit that mark and beat that Gretzky record. It's the new guys coming in, but also Milano, Lapierre, McMichael, even Tom Wilson. These guys need to step it up, and they need to be scoring goals, because this team in the goal scoring department just was not a threat last year.
Yeah, if we take a look at Mangiapane, a 28-year-old forward, had 40 points, 14 goals, 26 assists for the Flames in 75 games last season. So he's not going to set the world ablaze with his goal scoring, but I think that if he can find the Mangiapane that he was a few years ago, I think that the Capitals will be in a good position. So some other interesting moves out there is the fourth line was the strong suit for the Capitals. And what happened was, Beck Malenstein went out to the Sabres, which the Capitals turned for a great draft pick. And Nicholas Aube-Kubel also went out to the Sabres. So take a look at the Sabres kind of just sniping and scooping up the Capitals' fourth line. So one of the things that GM Brian McClellan did is he went out and addressed the positions, fourth line. He didn't leave any stone unturned. He didn't leave any holes in the lineup by acquiring Taylor Radish and Brandon Duhaime. Ostensibly, those are going to be the guys to fill those holes on the fourth line. Dan, what were your initial thoughts about Malenstein leaving, Nicholas Aube-Kubel, and return what the Capitals got, the players they got to fill those holes?
I was pretty shocked that Malenstein got traded. I didn't see that coming. I foresaw them kind of signing him to maybe a 1-year deal, a 2-year deal, maybe a 3-year deal, and kind of keep him around for a couple of years. I felt like he was one of those sort of outside the core group of players that sticks around for a couple of years. Once he's going to cost you too much, you trade him or let him go through free agency, and you bring in someone else from Hershey or a free agent to kind of take that spot that doesn't cost as much money. So when he got dealt for a second-round pick, that caught me off guard. I definitely didn't see that coming. Aube-Kubel, I think we all kind of knew that was unlikely to have him come back. He was kind of in and out of the lineup. I think it sounded like Carberry was a fan, but I just don't think that he was the right fit for what they're looking for, and I think they wanted to go one way or another in a different direction. Like even if they didn't trade Malson, they were probably going to let him go and either sign a guy or bring a guy up from Hershey. So I wasn't that shocked. The new guys, I was a little surprised because I expected them to give one or two guys from Hershey a shot. I mean, considering they did just win the Calder Cup, so you figured, well, someone might be ready to come up, and then they're like, nah, never mind. We're gonna sign these new guys. But I talked about Brett Connolly a little earlier, and both of these guys kind of feel like a little bit of that. Like you've seen earlier in their careers that there was some potential. There were some spots where you're like, ooh, they got some offense to their game. And so both can play, they can play a bit of a physical game. I think both of them can have goal scoring. And again, it's a low risk, high reward move. They don't cost a lot. They're not the ones looking at the cap hits and being like, ooh, what are we going to do about this if it doesn't work out? So I think there's definitely an opportunity. And we have seen that if they don't work out and you have to put them up in the press box for a little bit, for a game or for a significant amount of time, that gives you then that opportunity to bring up some guys from Hershey and say, look, you're getting this opportunity now. Don't mess it up. Take this and run with it. And these other guys, they're here to fill in if it doesn't work out and we can try it again. So I was surprised, but I like the moves. And I'm very curious to see how they're going to work out. I think there's some familiarity with some of the other players. Duhaime and Chychrun are buddies. Grew up in Florida, if I have it correctly. And so they all kind of know each other. And so I think you're bringing in new players, and that's always a bit of a risky thing. But when you bring in these new guys, they've already got familiarity, then I feel like it's going to be easier for them to kind of gel with everyone else, which is going to be great for this team, considering they have, a fair amount of new bodies.
All right, so coming up after the break, we'll talk about what the addition of Jakob Chychrun means for this team. We knew that the Capitals' blue line needed a boost. John Carlson couldn't do it all. Is Jakob Chychrun the guy to get that done? I'll discuss straight ahead. The other movement that took place was addressing the blue line, and this was something that really needed to be taken care of. John Carlson routinely playing 25 to 30 minutes a night. A guy that doesn't complain, goes about, does his business, and he's not the guy that just kind of mails it in. Like, you could put anyone out there for 25 or 30 minutes. It might not be pretty, but John Carlson plays some great hockey when he's out there, but not sustainable for Carlson, not sustainable for the Capitals. So the biggest move that really got my blood flowing was the acquisition of Jakob Chychrun on the blue line, and got him for an absolute steal. Oh, what was the trade? Nick Jensen and a 2025 third-round pick. Let's talk about that, Brandon. How did the Capitals get so lucky to fall headfirst into what is perceived to be quite a big pickup on the blue line?
I would love to know the magic show that they were able to pull off with this trade, because let me tell you, when this happened, Dan texted me and he was jumping off the walls. He was so incredibly excited. So I kind of feel a little bad I'm taking this question from him, but like, he loves Chychrun. He's a huge fan. And I was like, oh, well, Nick Jensen, I thought he was going to be with the Capitals a little bit longer. And Dan was like, you know what? I'm cool with it. See you later. I'm ready to go. Jakob Chychrun, what a pickup. I'm so happy that this happened. I think this is a great addition. I will say I'm a little sad that Rasmus Sandin and John Carlson won't be on the same pairing. I thought they worked well together, but it is kind of projected that Chychrun would be paired with Carlson. I can see that happening. Both of them are very talented. And I'm excited to see what they're going to do next, because this was what a signing, what a pickup. And I think this also kind of, Dan and I discussed this on What the Puck as well. Could the defense issues that they've kind of addressed, are they also addressing what they're going to do with the goaltending? Because really, you've got to have a strong defense in front of your goaltenders. And we've got Charlie Lindgren, who is now our number one guy. With this new defense, I think they're kind of giving Charlie the very best chance of being a number one goaltender in this league to kind of show off next season by making the people in front of him better. They're thinking he's going to be just as good, if not better, than he was last year.
And a lot to like about his game. He is a guy that he likes the offense. In his younger day, he was actually a forward and transitioned over to being a defenseman, a blue liner. So a guy that has a blue liner that has a goal scoring touch. I think is a good thing there as well. So, Dan, apparently you have an opinion on this, according to Brandon. What was your take on the addition of Jakob Chychrun to this team?
So I'm sitting at work and a buddy of mine goes, "Hey, the Caps got some like chicken guy," and I was like, "What? They got who?" And he goes, "Yeah, some dude from Ottawa," and I was like, "Ottawa,
Yeah.
because I wanted him when he was in Arizona, and they were like, "Oh, he kind of wants out of there," and I was like, "Yes, please." We'll take some of that. Like, this is great. He's a younger dude. You can lock him up for a bunch of years. He's got a really good game, offensive style, but he can play defense. Like, I hope, because he's a defenseman. And so, like, this is a guy that it perfectly fits in what you want this Caps team to be. Because what was it? Last year or the year before, they were like up here in terms of being one of the oldest teams in the league. It was like them and the Penguins. And this offseason, they have shifted that pretty dramatically. Even more so when you likely take Backstrom and Oshie off the roster in some way, shape, or form. And so they needed to get younger. The defense dramatically has gotten younger. Instead of having all their guys in their early to mid 30s, now we have guys still in their 30s. I say as a late 30s guy myself, but also you have a bunch of guys in their mid to late 20s, and so they're getting younger. When you're playing as this many minutes as a guy like John Carlson is doing, you're wearing down towards the end of the season. I think we saw that in the playoffs with Ovechkin, where he just had nothing left in the tank, and he's gotten no help from anybody else, not named Dylan Strome. So bringing in a guy like Chychrun and some of the other moves they've made, they're now able to spread the wealth in terms of minutes. And so as you get further into this season, Carlson's legs haven't turned into jello. He's not just out there willing himself to move because he's still got the energy. He's still there. And now you give him a night off, but you're giving him some shifts off and opportunities. We don't know what the lineup is going to be, both the forwards and the defense. I think there is going to be some rotation, both, again, with the forwards and the defense. We're going to see some of those pairings. I think, like Brandon said, Chychrun and Carlson, likely what it's going to be. I mean, Chychrun was sort of, I feel like if he didn't end up in Arizona to begin with, he probably stays with the team that picks him if it's, one of a bigger NHL club, putting that in air quotes for anyone listening on audio medium. But I feel like he's a guy that you can bring in. He's another I keep saying it, the low risk, high reward guy, because he's scheduled to be an unrestricted free agent. So if it doesn't work out, you haven't given up a ton to get him. And you can go out and make another move to try and replace him through free agency or through a trade. But if it works out, he's going to be expensive, but he's going to be worth it. And you've got your guy in a way to take over for Carlson when it calls time on his career. And he'll still be probably at that point when his early 30s. So you're not necessarily having to completely shift who's now the man on the roster in terms of the defense. I love the move. And I just really hope I'm not going to have to eat my words in like 7 months.
Yeah, it's one of the things that, that's how it's sketched out. We don't know how it's going to be, what the chemistry is going to look like. But I think on paper, it's a good upgrade. And you see this team getting younger on the blue line as well. We're talking Martin Feravari, Rasmus Sandin, those kind of players that stand to be part of the future of the team. You take a look at Vinny Iorio, Chase Prisky. I think that Dylan McElrath, while he doesn't fit the mold necessarily as one of the youngest ones, but I think that he would add a physical flair to the blue line as well. All right, listen, guys, Brandon, Dan, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. Brandon, why don't you tell everyone where we can find your work?
Absolutely. Yeah, we are What the Puck podcast. We are available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can check us out over on Facebook, facebook.com/whatthepuckpod. We also have a YouTube channel where we post up shorts and reels from our show. You can check us out, Brando Cash Pods. And we have an Instagram as well, Brando Cash Pods _reels. It's where you can check us out. If you'd like to follow me on X, you can follow me at Brando Cash. But Dan and I, we're entering our 12th season as What the Puck on our podcast, and we love talking Caps hockey. Thank you so much for having us on. This has been a blast. But yeah, if you'd like to check out What the Puck, that's where you can listen to us.
All right, Brandon and Dan, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, and I want to thank all of you for listening and watching this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel, available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app and on YouTube. Oh, but there's more. If you're a fan of other DC sports, we have Locked On Nationals, Commanders, and Wizards. So no matter what major DC sport it is, Locked On has got you covered. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.